Good morning, and how are you this morning? I hope you've had a really great Easter, and welcome to the sunny southeast of England. It really does look like it's going to be a glorious day, and in fact, the weather was just like this on Easter Sunday, but yesterday it was awful, windy and rainy. But I guess that's the month we're in, aren't we? April showers bring forth the May flowers. So, talking about May flowers, I have been doing a little bit of picking. Now, the eagle-eyed among you will realise I didn't actually pick these stems from my garden because, as you can see, it's all a little bit bereft of colour. And to be honest, I don't actually know what it is that I have picked. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So if you are joining me live, please leave me the hashtag live. And if you're joining me on catch up later on today, next week, next month, next year, leave me the hashtag replay and I'll catch up with you in the comments. And don't forget, if you're on Facebook, check out my free Facebook group, Florist.world. There's details of the group in the notes underneath the video. And that's the place for you to share your thrifted finds, your handicrafts, your homemaking, and of course the flowers you've got in your garden and your flower arrangements. Now, I will say that I know I've got cherry blossom in this bundle. And as I stood under the tree at my friend's house picking it yesterday, the scent was absolutely amazing. So I stood under the tree. It was in the spot where I left the house to take the dog out for a walk, and it started raining and it was really windy. I was all bundled up in my coat, and the time I got to the blossom tree, the sun was out, I was overdressed, and I stood underneath the tree looking up at the blue sky. And it's the first time I've really detected, a scent. We always expect our flowers to have a perfume, don't we? And whenever you get flowers and give them flowers, we bury our nose in them. But it was one of the few occasions when I've actually stopped and remarked on the scent that I've been enjoying. So I know that is cherry blossom. And of course, the Hanamai Japanese festival of the flowering cherries? I'm mangling that up a little bit, but I was saying to my husband the other day, we really ought to take ourselves out for our own little flower festival. Good morning, Linda. So, Linda, I don't know whether you've ever come down to Brogdale near Faversham. Brogdale hosts the National Collection of Fruit Trees, and they run Hamanai, a Japanese flowering cherry festival, and we did go one year and it was quite lovely, and they'd set out tarpaulins underneath the flowering trees and we took a picnic. And the following year we actually did our own little festival, and we went up to Mount Ephraim, which is a neighbouring stately home where you can get married in, and it's got grounds that are open to the public, and we just took a picnic and went to the grounds, and it was, I think actually of the two, that was the one I preferred. So just sort of mindful of the season, just nice to get outdoors. And if you haven't got your own flowering cherry tree where you could lie a picnic out, and probably need some blankets and some cushions as well, it's quite nice to go out and make a day of it, or at least half a day of it, and take a picnic and just to be in nature. So I know what these are. So I'm just going to try and be really careful with them so I don't damage the petals. I'm going to put those down over one side. Now, as I was walking the dog, we went to the local park, and there's been a bit of a furore on the community pages in town because lots of trees have been cut down. And I must say that as I went down the path into the park, I was a little bit taken aback too. So it's the wrong time to be cutting trees down because it's bird nesting season, but these trees hadn't actually been cut down. They've been heavily pollarded because the park backs onto the railway line, and if you commute to work, you'll know that common refrain in the winter time that the trains have been delayed because there are leaves on the line. So there's some maintenance work going on, a bit of a dodgy time of the year to be doing it. So there were trees that were felled absolutely everywhere. It looked, I say felled, I think they've been pollarded, so significantly reduced in height. So I have gone with my secateurs because I was on the way to my friend's house, and I snipped all these branches. I suddenly thought, actually, these are all going to come into leaf soon, so I may as well collect them. So I was fortunate I had those secateurs in my handbag, and I think they're poplar trees. Isn't it funny how you forget the names of trees? And they can hear the train behind me peeping its horn there. And it looks almost, the bark on this looks almost as if it's old-fashioned bamboo. My mum used to have an umbrella with a bamboo handle that was all gnarled and knobbly like that. So I think it's poplar. I'll have to check. I think it's poplar. So I've got some of those as well. And I just thought, even if I just put them in a vase on my kitchen windowsill, I could have spring happening inside my home. So from the little buds here, they're just starting to show a little bit of colour, but as they burst out. So top tip, if you're, out on a dog walk, pick the branches up that you see on the floor. They may look dead, but it's only because they're dormant, but the warmer weather, they will be wanting to burst out into bloom. And because I think that, as a florist, I should know the names of all my plants, I thought really I should do a little bit of prep, and perhaps I should use Google Lens to identify the plants here. But I will say I gave up in very short shrift, because when I did Google Lens and I wanted to show off the lovely buds here, they're like a lime green colour, and it came up with broccoli. Google Lens isn't always reliable, so it does make me laugh, because I know this isn't broccoli, but I'm just wondering about all those things I've Google Lens before and taken it at face value, and and the things that I've been going to the charity shop and finding whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong. I think you do have to have a little bit of knowledge. Now this again was a tree from my friend's garden, and of course I could have asked her, but I just don't recognise. And I saw it actually in several other places, like when you learn a new word, isn't it? You go out and you find something new, and then you discover actually it's all over the place. So I don't actually know what this is. It was quite a largish tree, so I was lucky I was able to get the branches that were hanging down. So I'm not entirely sure what it is. So if you know, let me know. And what I might do when I finish my arrangement, I will take photographs of the individual components and put them in the group, and under the guise of having a competition or a quiz, I will ask the members of the group what they think. So it's another good reason to be in the group. There won't be a prize, it'll just be the glory of you knowing more than me. The other thing I've collected as well is this. So these are just springing into leaf, and I think that is sycamore. And again, I should know the sycamore tree. We live opposite a little park, and it's got sycamore trees in it, and we're forever pulling the seedlings out of our garden. The little helicopter seeds that spin round, and they root really, really easily. And it's sort of like a weed, if a tree can be a weed. I thought, how pretty does that look? So again, I just found this by the railway embankment. I'll just have a couple of stems. So a word to the wise: if you are going for a walk or a dog walk into the countryside, and you have got your secateurs with you, just remember the foraging rules, that you shouldn't be trespassing on private property, and if you are cutting, it's about protecting wildlife sites, and cut those couple of stems that you need, and don't denude the whole area. And then the other thing I've got, and I wondered whether this had a scent, and I can't quite discern it. I don't know what that is. It's got a leaf that looks a bit like a privet hedge. Now, in fact, I don't think this is privet, but it's got the tiny little insignificant white flowers. Now, privet is actually highly scented as well, but normally we don't ever discover it's highly scented because privet hedges are clipped. But I will say, I can remember going away to Southwold, which is where the Adnams Brewery is on the Suffolk coast, and we were going for a walk, and we could smell this beautiful scent, and it turned out it was privet, and these hedges hadn't been trimmed back, so the flowers had been allowed to develop. And in actual fact, they also have some really striking black berries in the winter time that look quite architectural in style, and they look absolutely beautiful. But I'm always wary about cutting them and bringing them indoors, because number one, once they're indoors, the berries are likely to get fully ripe and squash, and you don't want to walk them into the carpet. And it's also, if you've got children around as well, having berries in the house isn't a very good idea. So I picked up a couple of stems of those, And from my friend's house, she's got a lilac tree. Now, I would like to say we have a lilac tree in our garden, and in fact we do, but it's overrun with ivy. And over the years, I think lilac trees, do they split? Because this one that I picked from had split. I guess perhaps the boughs just get too heavy with the blossoms. I don't know. I'm not a gardener. So what I did was I didn't want to spoil the enjoyment of my friend enjoying her lilac, but I picked my lilac stems. You can see how I'm owning it very quickly. They're no longer her stems, a bit of mine. So I picked from the bough that's sort of broken off from the main stem, and I think that's why these are so tall and straight. It's because the main bough had fallen, and then these stems were coming off, obviously wanting to get to the light, and they're quite tall and straight, which is rather handy for a little spot of flower arranging. So, on the subject, I'm just going to decline a phone call there. On that subject, I'm going to arrange my stems in a vase, and I think that's sort of the beauty is of this time of year, is this abundance. So it's a bit like we always think about the summertime as being really abundant, but now that spring is here, we can change those sort of little insignificant stems into something wonderful to bring indoors. And of course we're sort of moving with springtime as well, so it's really nice to be able to have a little bit of spring indoors in the comfort of your own home without having to go out in the wind and the rain and all the rest of it. So I am going to arrange my flowers, my stems, in this jug. I would say it's an earthenware jug. It's got a glaze on it. I would tip it over, but I've already put some water in it. But I'm just noticing it's got a mark on here. Oh, and it's just dawned on me what this mark might mean. A 2 and a Q. So for the American friends watching, is that quartz? We don't use quartz as a measure. Quart as in Quart, not with a Z on the end. That would be a semi-precious stone. 2 quart. So yes, if you're watching, what is a quart? How much volume is a quart? And because we buy our milk in pints, or most commonly litres these days. But then next to it, it says, I think it definitely says Dalton, but it's got a longer word. Dalton Ware, I'm guessing. Dalton Limited, Lambeth. So that's rather nice. It is really, really heavy. So it almost looks like a sort of earthenware beer jug. Perhaps it is a beer jug. Who knows? I shall have to get Google Lens out afterwards and to have a look. So I bought this at, you probably know I belong to a flower club, and every summer we have all the flower clubs get together for a day. There's a talk in the morning, we have a lunch, and then there's a flower arranging demonstration, and there's normally stalls that you can browse during the day. And one of the stalls was bring and buy. So this had been donated, and at the end of the day I thought actually it's a really good sized jug, and I bought it for a couple of pounds. So it's quite handy, but I have also got another more lightweight jug that I like using, and because I'm on a bit of a decluttering mission at the moment, I thought, what's the point of having 2 jugs that are quite similar? So this one was all packed up ready to go to the charity shop. Now, if you live locally to me, I've left some things out on at my front gate that you may be interested in, some of my thrifted finds. It's quite interesting to see who stops by and has a look at what's there. So some things have gone already, and if the things haven't gone by the time I go to the charity shop next, I'm going to charity shop them. But these things are sort of the bigger and the slightly better things I was going to take direct to the charity shop. And then I thought, I've just cut those lovely tall stems. There's quite a few of them. I want a jug that is slightly bigger than the one that I use more frequently. So I've whipped it out of my donation box. I think that's quite a good way of donating. Because it's a short walk into town for the charity shops, but if I'm donating, I can only walk into town with a lightweight bag. If things are heavier, I drive in, which means I don't donate as regularly as immediately as I would if I was just walking into town. So it's quite a good way, once you've decided you want to declutter, to sort of have it in the resting place and packed up, because it normally gives you a couple of days, or sometimes that turns into weeks, of rethinking whether you actually want to donate those items. So for me, this was quite a quick decision. I decluttered, put it in the box, and then pretty much immediately, after my dog walk yesterday, I decided I wanted the jug back. So I was quite glad I hadn't sent it off, because I think it's going to be quite useful. But one thing I thought I would do was just to sort of elevate my look a little bit, instead of just being a load of old stems in a vase, was I'm thinking that I might decorate this handle. Now this sounded like a really good idea when I was planning the video when I was in bed last night, but now I'm looking at my handle, I think it might be a little too, the grip area might be a bit small. In my mind I thought the handle came out like here, and what's running through my mind was that I've got a box of moss. So I went to the local street market, and as well as selling, flowers, I had this conversation going on, and how much is the moss? And I thought, what's all this about? And then when I went to pay, there were these polystyrene crates stacked up under the table, and it has moss in it. And the lady said £2. I reckon this box of moss, if you bought it at a wholesaler, would be, I don't know, £10 to £15. And then if you bought that from your florist, you'd triple that amount. So I thought I might use some of this moss. And actually, if you get hold of moss, you need to keep it damp. But what I have done actually is I've saved one bit of my moss, and that's indoors. This is a carpet moss, so it's flat like this. Now you will find that if you save your moss, it discolours a little bit. So what I'm doing at this time of the year is, when I've got my planted bulbs and containers, I'm using it as like a top dressing. Because the top, you've seen with my bulbs before, I've put a sprinkling of gravel around the top. It just sort of finishes off the look, so you haven't got bare compost to look at. So I've got these layers like this, and when you get them out of the box, they're sort of back together, so there's always got the nice green layer at the top, but then they sort of sandwich together, one up, one down, so the soil is together like a little layer cake. So if you do dig down into your box and think, well, where's all my moss gone, it's because it'll be on the underside. So I have actually already taken one layer of the moss off, because I know that by the end of the summer this will just be a bit of a brown gunky mess, but if I keep it cool and keep it moist, I could be using it for my door wreaths, because it needs moss. Now normally you wouldn't make your door wreaths out of the flat moss, because it's a premium price attached to it. Normally you would use the bags of sphagnum moss, because it's a better price attached. This is more of a decorative rather than a functional item. So what I have done, because I want to keep that moss green, is I've lifted a layer out of the box, and I'm just going to let it dry in my workshop. So the green will dull down a bit, but it's not going to go mucky and yucky. I will be able to use it in its dry state. And what I've done, you can see here, it's sort of got the forest floor on it. You can see the pine needles, so it just needs a little bit of a brush, and there's a few twigs in it which I would need to get rid of. So I'm going to take one of those pieces of moss, which then leaves me with the next one underneath. And as I say, you just need to be careful. You do want to keep them. It's always the one on the top that looks really nice. This one underneath is starting to break up a bit, but I think that is what I might do. So if I lift that up, and it's got the soil to soil side like that, so they are a bit like if you're sewing, right sides to right sides, but it's soil to soil, all layered up inside the box. So I thought, as I've got lots of moss and I haven't got any bulbs or planting material that I want to dress up at the moment, I kind of bought this as a future investment, because a bag of sphagnum moss in the garden centre will cost me £15 for quite a small bag. And I thought, why don't I decorate my handle with moss? So I've got my lovely glazed earthenware pot, but then with a little bit of a visual contrast. And if I make a good job of it, that moss will dry and it will just become a little feature which I could keep on there. Or when I get fed up, I can just cut it off, get rid of my wire and put the moss back on the compost heap. So do you fancy having a go with that? So what I'm going to do is, if I move you down a little bit, you should be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to, a bit of moss has fallen off there. So what I'm going to start off by doing is just teasing my moss a little bit. Well, not teasing it, I'm cleaning it off really. I want to see if I can get rid of these little bits of stick. And look, it's even got pine cones in it as well. So that is one thing I've got on my doorstep. I collected loads and loads of small pine cones over the years, and I've got an absolutely huge box of pine cones, which, to be honest, if you're doing pine cone crafts, you probably want pine cones that are about that big. If you've got children and activities, even dories, I was collecting mine purposely smaller, and I've just decided I've been there and done that, and I don't want to use any more pine cones that are that small. So I'm going to take a little bit of the moss and again dig around in the back here, more pine cones, any woody bits to take them out. And just sort of a bit of a brush. I'm trying really to keep the piece of moss whole, just because I don't want it falling apart. You can do it if you've got moss that's in looser bits, but I think as it's in one complete carpet layer, it would make sense to try and keep it all together. Look, twigs. This is what you do when you make a Christmas dory as well. This sphagnum moss is like tendrils, really, and you have to go through it and separate it and get rid of all those woody bits. Otherwise, you'll have a dory that is a pretty peculiar shape. So I've got that, and the idea being that I want to put it around like this, and they can see here what I meant in my dreams. I thought the handle was more pronounced, there was more of a gap, so I'm running the risk. I'm going to put this decorative handle on, and I may well end up filling up that little hole there. So I want this to put a sort of light touch on it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And in fact, I think the other pot that I've got like this, I think the handle is a little bit bigger, so I may well swap out and do that. So what I could do to reduce the bulk of my moss, which I might work with this. No, I haven't worked with this one, because there is a depth to it. You could reduce the depth by giving it a trim on the underside, so it becomes a thinner, less bulky piece of moss. And if you've got a garden that's full of moss, of course you could be raking it up, so that might be the thing to do when you're scarifying your lawn. I'm not quite sure what time of year you do that. It may well be this time after the winter months, and you rake out all the moss and you give your lawn a feed, and you'll find then that the moss is in little bits. But you could again still bind them together like you would do for Christmas stories and go round like that. But I'm hoping to make this a little bit or simplify it a little bit. We'll have to see whether that works. So I'm going to use mossing wire, which comes in a reel, and I'm going to tie it around and tie it in place. So what I'm conscious of here is I've got a nice glazed handle, and my wire is going to move down a little bit. I'm going to lie that cut end. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to keep that cut end exposed. So when I've gone round at once, I'm going to come back to the beginning and twist it off, and that will secure it all together like that. And then take my moss and wrap it around. Now, this thinking as well, is there enough space in my handle to go around? At the moment there is, and I can feel as I'm starting to bend that, I've got another twig. It's like a magic trick here. There's another twig that is, oops, it's snapping off. Ow, it's not bending. Look, hidden. All these little bits of treasure. So let's see whether we can do this. So just round and round. It's slightly tricky. What I could do is reel off some wire and thread it through as if I was sewing. I think that the reel it's on, the wire's on, is a little bit too bulky. So I shall go round. So to begin with, you're going round just to physically attach the moss on, and then you can go up and down to then encase it, and you can make, if you think it's a bit bulky, you can keep winding over it, and it'll really sort of scrunch it together. Now I've not got enough wire here, so I'm going to roll off a little bit more, and then I'm going to twist those two ends together so it's fixed, making making sure I'm not going to hurt myself. So I've managed to get almost down to the bottom of the handle, but not quite there. So this little bit here that I pulled off before, pull out the woody bits and some of that soil from the back, and I can add that on at the bottom. Again, I got another little stick in there. Right, I think that's all done. So round we go. Threading the wire back through the hole. Make sure it's not tangled. Go round again. So I've gone all the way down, so it's on. And then I need to do a little bit of finessing. I think I may well be spending the next few days pulling out those little pine needles just so it looks like a nice smooth green handle rather than having all these little bits sticking out of it. But you know, plenty of time to do that. So I'm going to go back to the top, find that first starting wire and twist it together. So if you were doing this using the sphagnum moss, which is a little bit hairy, I'm just burying those cut ends in there, so when I come to pick up the jug, I'm not going to cut myself. If you're using a different kind of moss, a sphagnum moss for instance, you might then want to go through and trim the handle a little bit just so it was nice and neat. So I can see I've got a little bit there that's sort of going the wrong way. And you know, any wayward bits. But of course, whenever you get a pair of scissors, you just want to do a light trim. You don't want it to be bald. And you can, as I say, you can finesse that. Take your time to do it. So let's have a look and see what that looks like. So you've now got a little mossed handle to your jug. I can see a little gap there. I'll add some more moss in later. So let's get on to the flower arranging. So I am going to start off with my tallest, my bushy stems first. So quite often when you're arranging flowers, if you start off with your skinny stems, if I went in with my sticks first of all, it's a bit like arranging spaghetti. So you want to get all your twigs in. So I don't know whether you watch Georgie Newbury from Common Farm Flowers, but she calls this the twig rookery. So the rules are the same as if you were using flowers or greenery, that anything that's going to be inside the vase or sitting in the water, you need to take off. So it's these little bits here. They all start to rot in the water, and then the bacteria that helps them rot down will shorten the life of your other flowers. So recut the stem ends. Sometimes with the woody materials you might want to actually cut into the stem to splay it open a little bit so that the water has got more surface area to get up. And I'll put that in the vase. It's going to rock around because that is just the nature of what will happen when you don't have many stems. I'm going to just put my bits of moss that I can reuse another time into my container so that when I clear up I can just put this lot straight in the compost because I won't be losing any of my my rubbish. So what I'll do here is measure up against the stem. I don't want them to be overly spilling, so I'm dragging my container to the edge of the table and then letting this stem here fall down in front of my knees, and I want the bushy bit to rest on the stem edge, so I can know here I need to cut off, you know, perhaps, what's that, 10 centimetres. I have got my secateurs here, so a nice sharp diagonal cut. Think about cutting into the stem as well, just to help with water uptake. So I've just plonked them down in the vase together. And then wayward stuff. So this is my sycamore branch, and it's got a branch down here. And I'm thinking I could just get rid of that, but if I was clever and cut that stem to length there, I could have that in the water like that. And then with this little bit, I could cut that knobbly bit off, recut the stem end, and then I've got a shorter piece. So when you're arranging your flowers, it just sometimes a little bit of clever cutting. So when I put that in the vase, let me put it in your side so you can see, it's a nice short piece and it just rests on the edge there, so it isn't lost. And I just need to make sure that I've got lots of water in the container when I have it on its final resting place. It's wanting to disappear, so I'm going to take it out for the moment. So what I like to do as well is to work through my materials. So I've gone in with my sycamore first of all. Well, I went in with my green leaves here and then my sycamore. And I just go through and use everything of that one material first. And I'm just putting them in for decorative effect. And I'm got half a mind as well as to where I'm going to have this. So this is going to be on my sideboard in my front room, and I know that that's quite a large area, so I can afford to go quite big, but also it'll be up against a brick wall, so I don't want to come out too wide because it will get squashed. So it's going to be a flattish back, and then it's going to be full to the sides and full to the front as well. So I'm going to make this for me. So you're looking at the back view in a moment, but you still need some plant materials in the back just to give that 3D interest. This is a rather lovely, isn't it? If you recognise that, let me know in the comments. So slipping away. See if I can show you that a little bit better. So just a very natural looking vase arrangement. I'm wondering whether I can lift this up. I'm not sure that I can, so let's just come down there a little bit. So what I'll do when I finish the arrangement is I'll put a photo in the community tab pages here in YouTube, but I will post a photograph in my Facebook group so you can see what it looks like. So there I've got my sycamore, my fancy lime coloured buds, and then my little scented flowers. Next thing I'm going to put in my lilac. Now if you ever buy lilac from your florist, it'll be slightly more developed than this. I'm not entirely sure whether this lilac will come into flower, and if you do buy, they can be quite difficult. So what I would do if you bought this from the florist, it would be slightly larger spikes. This is a lilac that is lilac coloured. You can get them in white as well. But what you would want to do is to take off the leaves in order that your water is going straight to your flower head. So as I've got quite a lot of green in this vase, I might do the same thing, just so that that gives it a best chance of actually opening up. And then I'm going to, where I find a gap, I'm going to push them in. And the trick here is to make sure that your flowers and your stems are all at slightly different lengths. It just adds a little bit of visual interest. So, if you're buying your flowers from the supermarket, they're all delivered in one standard length. And if you cut the stem, you need to recut your stems and put them in the vase, you'll end up with the flower heads sort of all at one level. So when you are arranging with plant material that's been, grown in a garden, it doesn't grow to a uniform length and shape, and that is to your advantage because you can make something look more visually appealing, and then stand back and have a look. So I want to make sure I get my lovely blossom in. So this is a very full blossom, and out of choice, I would have gone to my friend's house and picked this blossom a little bit earlier in order that, can you see it's arching? So I'm going to let it tumble out of the vase so that I could enjoy watching it open. What's going to happen here is as soon as it hits the warmth of my dining room, it's going to mature more quickly than it would have done if I'd left it on the tree. And I'm going to end up with some indoor confetti, which I don't mind, but it's just, an added pain. If you were doing this for the first time, bringing flowers into your home, you might think, well, what is the point of this? Because all these flowers are just shattering all over the place and it's a right old mess. But you can control it a little bit by picking slightly earlier in the season, and then the mess won't seem so bad. This looks rather spectacular. So the heavy flower heads are wanting to droop down naturally. So if I spin that round so you can have a look, you see how nice that looks? So it's just a really casual arrangement. So when you are arranging flowers, it's the aim is to get that opulent look. I'm thinking my stem here is a tiny bit too long. Just wobbling around a little bit. There, it's sort of nestled back down inside. And then to finish off, I'm going to put in my nude sticks, which is my poplar, to finish off. So as the cherry blossom fades, goes over, dies, I can pick that out of the vase, and then hopefully it'll start to be replaced by the poplar stems, which should start to burst into leaves. At the moment, it looks like I'm just putting a load of dead sticks in this, but it will all be okay in the end. And this is quite a nice thing to do outdoors. It's a nice sunny day. I will say I'm slightly cold, although I've tried to dress for the weather. I've got my lightweight jacket on and a scarf, and the sun is just starting to come round, so there is a little bit of warmth on my back. And nice to be out in the garden because I can hear the birds singing, and of course when I come to tidy away, it's much easier doing it when you're in the garden and everything goes straight on the compost heap rather than having snipped stems all over your kitchen floor. And now you can see here I'm starting to... Good. So Linda says she's going to have a go at this one. Well, Linda, you will have to post a photograph in the group when you're done. The moss is quite a nice thing to do, but yes, I wouldn't go out and buy a box of moss just to do this. But I just wanted to show you that you can be a little bit decorative with what you put in your vase, but also how you decorate your vase as well. And then you just keep going. So quite often I'm asked at class, how do you know when to stop? Well, when you've run out of materials, it's a good time to stop. Or you just have to look back every so often and think, how's it looking? See, what I will do as well, I'm probably, because I've only got a few more sticks left, I'll probably keep going until I've put all my sticks in. But what I will do is when I have this up on the side in my front room, I will probably, well, I can guarantee that I will adjust a little bit, because as I'm arranging and talking to you, I'm not 100% concentrating. And also I'm arranging looking down, and I know that when I look at this vase arrangement in my front room, I'll be looking at it more face on. So it may well, the balance might not be right, but I will just have a little bit of adjusting. So there you have it. Doesn't that look lovely? And I misquote, I always misquote this quote. Oh, to be in England now that April's there. Is that Tennyson? I don't know. But my husband and I quite often say that quote and we realise we are misquoting. But you get the sentiment, don't you, that everything is coming into flower. And that's just the sense of hope that's in the air. So just hang on, everything will be okay. So I'm going to leave it there. I will post some photographs against a plain background so you can see more clearly my finished arrangement. And the trick is, you don't have to be a superstar at flower arranging. You just have to make a start. Find yourself a watertight container. Pick yourself some flowering twigs, and make sure, if you can, use a really sharp pair of scissors or secateurs and just make a really clean cut, and that will help your flowers take up more water, and of course then they'll last a little bit longer. that's all for me for now. I'm going to say goodbye. Don't forget to watch yesterday's video. That was the one where I went to Petticoat Lane Vintage Emporium here in Ramsgate. Spent hours and hours there, and I shall be live in the Facebook group on Friday lunchtime at 12 noon. So I shall say goodbye. Thanks for joining me, Linda, and I hope you had a great Easter, and I'll catch up with you same time, same place next week. Bye.